Hello, pumpkins. Tough topic to talk about today. So we are going to talk about my deepest, darkest secret that I have not told anyone ever, and now I am about to tell the entire internet. And I'm saying this because it's become relevant, and I think that there needs to be more coverage of this subject. Content warning, I am going to be talking about some sensitive topics today, childhood essay, violence, the attempted act to take one's life, the attempted act to take the life of another, substance use, religious trauma, family trauma, grief, PTSD, loss of a child's life, lots of big stuff. So if you're sensitive to these issues, please do skip this episode because I can see how this would be quite triggering to some people. So, I don't want to talk too much about my childhood and my parents. I think that my parents, especially my dad, did the best that they knew how to do, and I don't want to vilify them or to disparage them on the internet, but there were issues, and I had issues, which were completely undiagnosed, and my family places a great deal of value on not showing emotion. I don't want to say that my family is stoic, but I mean, kind of like happy and mad are kind of the only emotions that were ever allowed, and things like grief and depression and fear and anxiety were not tolerated. And if I was to cry as a child, I would be swiftly told to quit your bawlin'. And this was not healthy, especially when we had the loss of a child in the family. I've mentioned a few times that my brother passed away. He was older than I was. I was 10 when he passed away. And those issues were never really dealt with on a healing or emotional basis. And shortly after my brother passed away, my grandmother passed away, and my grandmother and I were quite close, and she took care of me a lot when my family was busy dealing with my brother who was ill and my younger sister who had asthma and breathing issues. So yeah, I spent a lot of time at Grandma's. But I still had undiagnosed depression, undiagnosed anxiety, undiagnosed CPTSD. I was being horrifically bullied at school and getting no assistance. I had undiagnosed autism. I had undiagnosed ADHD, so there were all these issues that I was just kind of expected to pull it together and be neurotypical, and there was no understanding that there was something that was wrong. There was really not much of an attempt to get me any sort of diagnosis or help. There'd be kind of like a session. We went to like a family session once with a terrible psychologist who wanted to blame me for everything. I had an irrational fear as a child, and instead of dealing with this, the root cause being the death of my brother, the irrational fear was just blamed on me, and I was just told to get over it. I went to summer camp every summer for a week, and really enjoyed that experience. And then when I was 13, I came home from summer camp, and as you can probably imagine, 13-year-olds in a cabin for a week didn't sleep a whole lot. So I got home and I crashed, and I really just did not have the energy to do my camp laundry. Ended up getting in a huge argument with my father and was kicked out of my house at 13. My mother took me to a child center of some sort. I don't want to say it was an orphanage. It was, I don't even know what it was called. But it was a child center of some sort, and she was going to drop me off there. And they said, no, I'm sorry, we only deal with children up to the age of 12. We don't have any services for your child. You can't leave her here. And so my mother took me to the local women's shelter and tried to drop me off there, and they said, no, I'm sorry, she's only 13, you can't just abandon her until she's 16. If you abandon her, we are going to call the police and CAS, or Child Services, and you will be charged with neglect. So my mom stayed with me that night in the shelter. The next night I went home to my parents'. I could feel myself going into a very unemotional state trying to deal with this. I probably shouldn't have worn mascara to do this video because I may cry. Anyway, I wasn't a bad kid. I was troubled. I certainly had mental health issues. I certainly had neurological issues. But I wasn't a bad kid. So in high school, most of my friends were in my church youth group, or I was on the debating team. I was on the Reach for the Top team, which was like a trivia team. I had decent grades, although I was certainly underperforming for my potential. I didn't hang around bad kids. I remember there was one kid who, like, she'd go shopping for her clothes in Montreal, and in our small town, I was like, wow, she's almost like a grown-up. And anyways, when I turned 16, my parents started to put the wheels in motion for me to move into a group home. I didn't know how far along they were in that process, but one day I came home from church and everything I owned was packed up and in the driveway, and I was told to go inside and call the group home to pick me up because they were done with me, because they legally didn't need to take care of me anymore. And I did go inside and called the group home to pick me up, and I don't think that I ever recovered from that. It was clear that I was my dog has a pair of underwear, so just give me a second. Lily, that is not for doggies. No, we don't eat mummy's cookies. Wrong. Wrong, we don't eat that. Here's a bone. Give your bone. There you go. Good boy. Thank you for your patience there. I still don't know how to edit that out. I will learn to do so eventually. So, I ended up going to this group home. The primary worker, who was supposed to be like my care worker, she was on maternity leave, and she ended up coming back close to the time that I left. She and I are actually still friends, or we became friends as adults. She is a wonderful lady, and she has left the Troubled Teen Institute and actually owns a restaurant in my former city. So it is delicious, and I could really go for some baked brie with the roasted garlic right now. Oh boy. Okay, so enough of my craving. There was one staff member who would take away my shoes if I wanted to leave, but which was technically should have been against policy because it was a voluntary program, and that's theft, and I understand that he was trying to keep us safe, but that wasn't a good way to do it. I don't really have complaints against the actual staff. I don't think that they were completely prepared or able to deal with the situations that were happening in the house, which was hard. I think that the situations in the house and the dynamics in the house were really the tough part because, like I said, I wasn't a bad kid. And there were some other people in the house. I mean, people moved in and out, so the place I was in could hold up to 10 teenage girls from the ages of 13 to 18. I don't know why I didn't end up there at 13, but I'm kind of glad I didn't. So there were girls who were, some of them had, just mental health issues. Some of them were, a bit more severe than I was, and I'm not going to say that I wasn't severe or I wasn't, having issues. My first attempt to take my own life I was 11. My first ideations of taking my own life were age 5. I was engaging in some not good behaviors that were causing harm. But there were kids that were criminals. That one girl was there, and she had just graduated from a juvenile detention center, youth jail of some sort, and had tried to kill someone. And there were kids who had, drug issues, and I had never been around anyone who'd done drugs. I'd never been around anyone who drank. I'd never been around really other kids who were sexually active, and there was one kid who, had a baby at 13, and I had never skipped school before, and all of a sudden I'm in with some violent offenders, and I don't want to blame these other girls for my own behavior, but at the same point, I was exposed. I was going in there really naive, and I was exposed to a lot of stuff that I'd never been exposed to before, and there were girls whose family members had done awful things to them that should not be done by a family member to a child, and this was all like really hard for me to process, like what these kids had gone through, and I've got my own stuff that was going on, and I don't think that was a good place for me to be. Now later on, I did develop friendships that I still have to this day with some of those girls, and some of them, I'm not close to any of them, but some of them I've talked to on Facebook, and, they're good people, and they just had, crappy home situations too, or they had, untreated or undiagnosed mental health issues too, and, I don't want to lump them kind of into it, but, dealing with, like, there were girls who had gang connections, and me coming from a small town of 2,000 people, and, I'd never skipped school before, I'd never drank before, and, my Friday night was at the church youth group, and there were kids in gangs, and that was really scary for me, and I think that I ended up kind of becoming, after a year, like, a bit of a bad kid myself, and ended up skipping school a lot, and ended up getting in violent fights, and I went home for a visit and ended up in a physical altercation with my younger sister, and I don't think it was a good place for me because of what I was exposed to. And I think that the staff members were good, but I feel that they were ill-equipped to handle some of the stuff that was going on there. My family life was not where I should have been. The group home was not where I should have been. I don't know where I should have been, and certainly even to this day, many years later, I struggle with feeling accepted and feeling a sense of belonging and feeling a sense of connection. I've talked about before of having adult reactive attachment disorder, and this tends to happen when young children receive their physical needs met, but experience emotional neglect, and certainly that was something I went through as a kid, and that's certainly something that was exacerbated by being kicked out at 16 and having to live in a group home. So after that place, I went to a preparation for independent living place, and because I couldn't go home. And some of these young people, they could go home afterwards. They had families who accepted them, and they were able to get stabilized and get better. And some of these young girls were from homes that absolutely they should not have gone back to, but I wasn't welcome back at home. So I went to this preparation for independent living program. It was like 3/4 of the way to independence. That was called 3/4 House. And they taught you things like budgeting and house chores, and you had to be a part of a daily program. I was still in high school because I was 17 when I moved in there. So I was in high school, and I ended up working a retail job, and then I ended up working a call center. I was paying rent and living as a grown-up and learning how to cook my own food and all that stuff, which, I ate a lot of Kraft dinner, which for Americans, that's boxed macaroni and cheese. because I was po. I used to joke that I wasn't poor, I was po. I couldn't afford the O and the R, I could just afford the apostrophe. And I think that that was really difficult. I think that I did graduate from high school. A lot of the girls who went through what I went through didn't graduate. Some of them did, but it was hard. And living on my own. And I remember I was in choir in high school, and I remember one of the girls saying in choir that, my parents grounded me, so I can't do this, and here I am. Like, I didn't have a curfew. I didn't have parents to ground me. I just had me, and that was hard. That no one gave a crap, and if I disappeared, and even I think today, like, if something happened to me, how long would it take to notice? And maybe that's why I post every day, so that there's a mark sign that I'm still here, and that, if you don't hear from me for a few weeks, maybe somebody should check on me, or, check on the dog at least, because, my mind goes to places it shouldn't when I think about, if I fell in the shower or anything like that. I'm not at risk of doing anything to myself, but I think about, I could fall in the shower and hit my head, or fall down the stairs going to laundry, and who's gonna notice? So anyway, regardless of that, I have heard a lot about I can't remember, Danielle, who goes by Bad Baby, and Paris Hilton, talking about their experiences, and Bad Baby talking about her experiences after Dr. Phil had sent her to the ranch. So there are different programs. There's also, I heard another program about another. Yeah, there's a ton of kids that are in these troubled teen places, and some of them are better than others. I know one thing that I dealt with when I was living in the group home was, at the time, there were no locks on the doors, and I was dealing with kids who had criminal histories and criminal records, and I couldn't lock things up, and my clothes would go missing all the time. I had my grandmother's jewelry box, and the lock was broken open, and things were taken from it, and my camera was stolen. I had a Walkman that was stolen, and I had no privacy, and any sense of self or autonomy was ripped from me, which was really, really difficult. And just independent things that I was used to doing for myself were monitored and regulated, and so that's kind of my experience. I remember being so ashamed of my classmates at school finding out where I lived, and people wanting to ask why, or assuming that I was a criminal because I lived there, and confusing a group home with a juvenile detention place. And some of the girls have gone on and they've done well. I know one of the girls who I lived with has gone on to local politics, and I actually introduced her to her husband, and they have several kids together, and I believe that she's doing well. I know two of the other girls are working in healthcare as personal support workers, which I did for a number of years. But I also know some of the other girls are not doing so well. I bumped into one girl who, same age as I am, and she's had 7 children, and she's never worked a job in her life. And I remember in the time I knew her as a teenager, she had 2 pregnancies that were not carried to term. So 9 different men have gotten this girl pregnant, and instead of wanting to call her names or assume that she's has loose morals, I think that she was probably in pain and probably wanted to be loved and probably wanted to feel needed, and made poor decisions, because humans make poor decisions when we're desperate, and when you've been through a lot, your red flag bullcrap detector sometimes gets broken, and you take love wherever you can get it. I certainly have had awful experiences in my adult dating life, not knowing who to trust. When I was living at the group home, there was a boys' group home that we sometimes got together and did activities with. And my first real boyfriend was from the boys' group home, and he. When I say pathological liar, I mean, some people are like, oh, they lie, so they're just going to put the word pathological in front of it to make it sound bad. But no, he was a pathological liar and told these tall tales, and I didn't know better than to believe him. And I later found out that the reason why he was there was because of arson. That he had gotten mad at his family and burned the house down. He was abusive to me, and when I left, shortly after moving from that group home into the three-quarter house, I went to a youth camping trip called Outward Bound, and that was a 3-week-long trip, and some of the hardest times of my life, but some of the best times of my life. And during that time, he apparently knew what street I lived on, and he was walking up and down that street trying to find me so he could burn my house down. I do think that the child system does need an overhaul. I think that there needs to be different levels of service for different needs, from those who have intellectual disabilities to those who are dealing with more mental health stuff to those who are more violent offenders. I think that there does need to be more training. I know that training has certainly changed since I was involved in the system, but I carry a lot of shame about the fact that I even lived there, because of the stereotypes, and because we're seeing people come out of those. I was more broken when I left than I was when I got in. I don't know if I'm thankful for those experiences or if I regret those experiences, but that was probably not the best place for me to be. So yes, that is my experience in the troubled teen industry, living in a group home, and I think I'm gonna go have myself a bit of a cry, or maybe just a shower and wash all that stress away. But in the meantime, I do hope that you all stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask, and I will see you later. Bye, pumpkins.